Hello! Pleasure to have you here. I'm Casper, and at the time I started jotting down ideas, it's just past midnight. This is obviously the best time to think about things, so here I am, giving a relatively unscripted reminisctive on my journey primarily through Final Fantasy XIV's main story quests. And that combination of words sounded better in my head, but screw it, I'm going with it. That's my word now, I guess. And chiming in from an hour and a half into the future, a few paragraphs in, what I mean by relatively unscripted is, yeah, I'm writing stuff down, but it's going to be largely unedited, so it's just me splooging words onto the document. I'll look up certain dates or have internet tabs open for talking points. Please forgive me for the mess that is the number of tabs you see up top, but it's mostly just candid. At the time of this recording, and also probably uploading because I don't think I have the patience to edit this much, if at all, we are 19-ish days away from Endwalker's worldwide early access release, and 22-ish days away from its full release. With the release looming so close, and with a pocket full of salt at my death in heaven on high, while I had a full set of Pomanders and 3 Magicite, one of which was an Elder Magicite. I thought I'd take a trip down memory lane. And man, is it a strange one. I was very close to being a story skipper. And, in fact, I did skip a lot of A Realm Reborn at first. Which I guess is a good enough segue into A Realm Reborn 2.0, if I didn't want to preamble about how I first got into it. Good job, brain. I was never huge on MMOs. There were really only 3 that I can think of that ever hooked me before Final Fantasy XIV. I played RuneScape with my friends in my early days of youth, and we would roleplay that we were adventurers who owned some random NPC's house, and freak out every time it respawned because, a burglar! Everybody get him! But I never seriously grinded the game, partly because I was too young to understand how to take it even semi-seriously, and partly because I guess I just didn't want to. I also played Nexon's Maple Story on its release, and sometime after that, stopping around when the Pirate class was introduced. My first and only prior love of MMOs came in the form of another Nexon game, Mabinogi. Mabinogi. What a huge dump of birthday, Christmas, and first job money. I played its beta, I fell in love, and I played the crap out of the game, dude. I played through Generation 1, Generation 2, 3, all the way from Alad to Iria, into Belvest, Shakespeare, from simple melee magic and ranged combat to dual wielding, transformations, alchemy, puppetry, and all kinds of different things. Good golly gee willikers, did the variety have me in love, dude. Jumping back to RuneScape, I guess it's called Old School RuneScape now, huh? Rip. Anyway, point is, I was kind of casually into MMOs. I'd never really heard about other MMOs or looked into them, because it wasn't my niche. And due to only having Nintendo consoles in my house until my older sister got a job and purchased a PlayStation 2, the only Final Fantasy game I'd ever played at that Mabinogi point was Final Fantasy XII. The only reason I ever had an interest in a non-Nintendo game or console was because my sister bought Kingdom Hearts, and it wrapped its grippy, grubby fingers right around my Disney-loving heart. All of which is to say, I had never heard of Final Fantasy XIV. Not of its 1.0 release, none of my high school friends played its 2.0 release or 3.0, and it wasn't until midway into the 3.0 cycle, somewhere around 3.3 or 3.4, I assume, when Stormblood was revealed, and looking at my files, it does say that my character was made July of 2017, but looking into that file, it looks like all of the logs have had their dates reset to sometime around 2018, which means the creation date of the 2017 thing could have been reset at some point as well. I did have my old hard drive corrupted, so maybe when I moved stuff onto the new one, it reset the date. Sorry. My online pal told me about it and convinced me to try. I was told about cross-class skills, and I was told that a rumored new class was going to be Dancer. And looking into the existing classes at the time, I had this fantasy about cross-classing Monk and Dancer without even really understanding what cross-classing was. I was just hyped at the idea of being a punchy boy with grace and light feet and twirls and shit. And then I tried the game and I didn't even get to level 15. It did not sell me. So, I stopped playing it until a year later. My current friend group, who I still play the game with, and I, sans 3 specific individuals, were all invited to Final Fantasy XIV by one of the 3. And you can't see it, but now 3 is, and will, both, 3 is and will be both a capitalized and fully written word to signify its importance. Stopping by and asking my friends on Discord, they started midway through May of 2018, just before the 5.3 release, and I started about a month later, so there's my time frame. My friends had all progressed a long way through A Realm Reborn, and I felt pressured to catch up to them. So, at the behest of one of the 3, and my other friends playing, I joined. And I was promised by one of the veteran players, guiding everyone else, that I wouldn't just be left behind in the dust. So I asked what the best DPS was, because I wanted to do big damage, and I was told that Samurai and Summoner were the top dogs. But Samurai wasn't available at the start. And to me, that it felt like a very engaging conversation. And I felt excited by this promise that I'd be guided along and quickly catch up to everybody. So I picked Summoner to nuke things practically to endgame, with the idea to at least try Samurai, because I love the aesthetics of Samurai and Japan stuff. And he then proceeded to leave me behind in the dust and guide everyone else along, and largely leave me alone for the early levels. I even have this one silly in retrospect memory of me doing that one Thanalan Fate on the bridge with all the long-necked snaky boys. I did like 70% of its progress by myself, and then another player came along and started smacking everything. And I was already upset that I wasn't receiving any help from the veteran player friend. And although I didn't say anything in the in-game chat, I remember complaining in voice call to my pals that this random other player was stealing my experience, because they were getting the hits on the boys and I had almost completed it. Stealing my experience. From a Fate. I did not understand that Fate experience would be shared. Not really anything was explained to me by the old-time player, one of the 3. And it had been long enough since my last try, and my previous friend's guidance was completely out my noggin. I didn't remember it. And even beyond that, the veteran friend encouraged me to rush. He told me that I could catch up to everybody by skipping a lot of dialogue, because A Realm Reborn was largely inconsequential, and any minor story bits I needed, he would fill me in on. So I rushed through the story. I rushed through A Realm Reborn. I skipped dialogue, skipped cutscenes, had no clue why I was going anywhere, had no clue why I was cleaning up bodies outside of the Waking Sands, and I eventually got to Praetorium. That's a big story skip, but that's what it felt like. I just got to pray. And while I did indeed skip a lot of the story, there were a few times where I attempted to read a bit of it. A few bits of story I remembered. On my new character, because I started as an Arcanist, I started in Limsa, but on my old one, I started in Ul'dah. And for some reason, I remembered the bit with Nanamo and Thancred, so when I hit the Praetorium, and I saw La Habrea floating there at the end, I couldn't believe it. I was so amused at myself. that for some reason Square Enix could not think of a new character model or a new design, so they made someone who looks weirdly similar to that Thancred guy. Who the fuck is this Thancred-looking motherfucker, and why have I never seen him before? Why is this bad guy just here? Little did I know. Good times. And then came 2.1, with Good King Mog and its Nightmare Before Christmas music, which I largely skipped through. 2.2 with Leviathan, I largely skipped through. 2.3, Rama? With Rama, skipped. And then came patch 2.4. I was nearing the end of post-ARR, and my friends were somewhere in Heavensward, if I can recall. I was still very upset that I was so behind, but damn it, I was determined to play the game with my friends, even if I wasn't enjoying it too terribly much. And at the very least, I had unlocked Samurai somewhere in the last few patches, and that was helping me keep my sanity because the gameplay was far more intuitive to me than Summoner. And then Shiva happened. Oh boy, the Shiva fight. That was it. That was the point when I realized I actually really, really liked the game. Maybe it crept up on me, or maybe it really did all happen at that exact moment. But all I know is that the Shiva fight is when I realized this game was something special and something to be experienced. The start of the fight, the ads, the freeze in place, the raindrop sound into ice shattering, into those goddamn lyrics, dude. Holy crap. So I slowed down and I started reading the story. I got a synopsis on A Realm Reborn. I eventually made a second character to experience A Realm Reborn, as New Game Plus wasn't a thing at that point. And I'd forgotten about the Waking Sands event. And that hit super hard when I got there, and I felt so freaking embarrassed about my Thancred-looking guy comments. My fellow Scions were framed and sacrificing themselves left and right for me. Alphino had a lot of growing up to do real fast. I learned about Heavensward, the Dragon Song War, the Warriors of Darkness, everything. And holy crap, it sucked me right in. In Heavensward, I found a family. I found souls that cared for me, that were willing to jump into the face of danger to save me. My fellow Scions became much more fleshed out, Alphino especially. I lost much and more, but I kept going. I had a goddamn Pope battle, dude! And it sucked me in at a point that I had no real job or obligations at the time, so I ended up blitzing through. Not because I was skipping. No longer was I blazing through the story because I was skipping, but because I was so engrossed that 1 hour could turn into 8 without me realizing it. I was catching up to my friends in the story, and it really helped me. Final Fantasy XIV really helped me start to get out of a bad funk I was in at the time. Haurchefant and Assail coming back clutch, helping us with freeing Estinian. The Warriors of Darkness appear. We learn that Ardbert's world is torn asunder. Hydaelyn has seemingly refused to appear and help, and then Minfilia, now acting as a vessel of Hydaelyn, goes to help the First. Oh, it was so good, dude. It was so good. And I'm losing my mind. My plan was to click through these as I had talked about them, but no. Good job, me. And then came Stormblood. And the 2 patches prior to it. Goodness gracious, do I love me some freaking Japanese aesthetics, man. It took some time to get there, but it was damn worth it. And at the time, I didn't really care much for Elise, but Papa Limo's loss was tough. Sloppy's master plan and turning into Shinryu was great, and holy fuckballs did the Omega versus Shinryu fight have me pumped, dude. Following all that, Stormblood. All Amigos' liberation was a very fun storyline. And it felt nice having these long threaded storylines of the Alamegan refugees from all the way back in Ul'dah, from the little Alamigo camp, all of that come to bear fruit. I even have a memory of being absolutely unable to fight Xenos for some reason. Dude was doing like a fourth of my health bar with every BAP, which doesn't make sense, because I had the eye level to be there. I completed the last dungeon of Heavensward. Maybe I didn't fully commit to Samurai until that point? I can't quite remember, honestly. But it was hilarious having to run and sprint around the arena, throwing NP at him, popping potions, praying. But man, did I love the Kugane side of things so much more. The shifty blonde tradesman who, for the longest time, I did not fully trust. I don't know about you guys, but like, look at that smile, those glasses. He had to be hiding something, right? Oh, I did not trust that man. The tradesman, the Kojin, underwater travel, everything, including the accent, the step trials, Gosetsu's whole everything, the heartbreak at watching such a lovable, iron-willed, gentle giant being tortured by a cruel and vindictive woman hell-bent on watching the world burn, the liberation of Doma from the Guardian forces, oh boy, the dungeon, and the cutscenes that followed. And all amidst that, Fordola. Oh, Fordola, how they made you shine later. And at the end of all of Stormblood, at the end of so much build-up, I don't even know if his face is shown anywhere here. I don't think it is. Facing off against the fight-sexual Xenos. No, of course, just smacking and murdering his face wasn't good enough for him. He decided to do the freaking fusion dance with an icon. Unfortunately for him, I ate primals for breakfast. And then one amazing trial later, I don't even get the win? He denies himself in one of the most brutal freaking ways possible. A gruesome end for a merciless foe. And by the time I finished Stormblood, I passed most of my friends in the story. I got to working on post-Stormblood before them, and I definitely teased them just a little bit about it, but with 4.1, I got my expected Fordola's return. Although it was definitely way earlier than I anticipated. I thought there was going to be a lot more time to let Fordola sit on the sidelines, but no, they brought her front and center, and holy crap, dude, what a freaking return. What a backstory with her parents, aw. Only for all of that scorn that she received from everybody else to continue into adulthood. As she did what she thought was the best course of action given her circumstances. Only for her to have to further suffer everybody's malice and hatred from a forced echo that seemingly couldn't turn off. Imagine, as the guard changes every few hours, or even just once a day, new guard, new backstory to live through, new pain to suffer, and new curses she learns is thrown at her constantly. How many of those guards must have had thoughts or even conversations to the other guards about how she's better off dead, or she should be dealt with immediately, or they wish they could just go in there and wring her out and fucking... And she can't not hear it. It's always blasting in her head, and yet despite hearing that, she still wants to save people, dude. She still wants to save Alamigo. So, against the scorn of everyone around her, at Lisa's request, without a second thought, she joins the Lakshmi fight, protects everybody, and is completely prepared to just leave and return to her cell. Thank you, old man. Thank you for giving Fordola what she needed to hear, or at least part of it. That, yeah, she can't be forgiven. She did terrible things, but she can be thanked. And then the return of my boy! My boy and his new ward of sorts. The Whiplash Man. Suyu makes an appearance with Gossetsu. If Yotsuyu hadn't been so reprehensibly abused, so unacceptably treated like inhuman garbage, there was a chance that she would have become something akin to Suyu. This innocent and sweet, caring person. And that was taken from her, dude. And then the peace negotiations, fucking Asahi shows up, and Jesus, 4.2 and 4.3 were such good patches. And 4.3 hit hard, man. It hit so hard. The emotional crescendo of abuse and resentment, of manipulation, of the crippling recollection of past events, and feeling like there was nothing she could ever do to live with that. Of retribution and revenge, and her transformation and her fight. Her realization that before, all of her strength came from misery. Her hatred, her fear, and her helplessness at the hands of her parents, of everybody around her, and Xenos. She allows it all to help her feel stronger in that moment. And yet, in that moment, Gossetsu breaks through. The innocence of Suyu, the everything. Even beyond her being absolutely convinced that all she had in life and all she was pain and misery and suffering and torture. Some part of her, some part of that innocent Suyu clung tight to her heart. Gossetsu clung hot. And he comes in with the goddamn saving of Xenos and And even though she lost in the end, even though Suyu deserved better, she got the win. Goodbye, Asahi. Goodbye, her unending, insatiable hunger. Gossetsu will miss you, and I will miss you. And it was around that point. It was around patch 4.3 that I caught up. And I started raiding. I even got to try my hands at Sigmascape, I believe is... Yeah, Sigmascape. I even got to try my hands at Sigmascape raiding. With Toaster Boy? I distinctly recall that, never having raided before, having zero experience with it, being an MMO newbie, essentially. I looked for a casual raiding group on the Balance Discord at the behest of one of at the recommendation of one of the three. I looked for a group willing to accept someone with zero experience and willing to teach. A group willing to just laugh and have a grand time and crack jokes and things. And I found a group that took me. Only for the raid leader to tell me that I did really bad that night, and I needed to step up my game, for the raid leader told me to not joke around during raid night because everybody was being serious, and that he, quote, didn't want to have to kick me, end quote, but heavily implied that he was going to. After the first night, when I, specifically said that I hadn't had any raiding experience, they tossed me the guide minutes prior to starting the fight? Oh well. I ended up finding a different raid group when Suzaku came out, and I did swimmingly in the new environment. I think to this day, Suzaku is still one of my favorite fights in the game. And with 4.4 and 4.5 came my fellow Scions dropping. One after another after the other, a mysterious voice beckoning us and yanking my friends away over and over. It was gripping, dude. It was so nerve-wracking. It was horrifying waiting for the patches, knowing that even though mid-patch, Kryl wasn't just gonna suddenly be able to be unable to care for the Scions. They wouldn't just croak out of nowhere before the next .x patch. But their fate was like still super up in the air. And then the fucking political tension with... Oh, it was great. And when at last I got my answers about where they were, about where I was going, when I traversed the rift, and I saw glimpses of my past, when I Skyrimmed my way into the first purple forest, when I started over and met kind Mr. Peddler, one bearing the same face of the one that introduced me to Eorzea. What an opening. To this day, I'm still torn on if I liked my Warrior of Light noticing the ring and then flashing back to the man, or if I would have preferred just the ring being shown on the ground. In some ways, I wish it was left unmentioned. If you recognize the ring from him offering you the booze, you got it. And if not, then you'll probably have someone else point it out at some point down the line. If it happens 20 minutes later when your friends are geeking out about it, you get the realization. If it happens months down the line when someone else is playing the game for the first time and they point it out, you get to have that, whoa, oh shit moment, you know? But beyond that, the sense of immediate dread present when not only did this kind merchant immediately bite the bucket, when moments later? Earlier? No, it's just moments earlier. When moments earlier, Lena questions where you're from, and you realize she's never heard of Aldania Minsa. And when the Sin Eater sneaks up behind you, Lena takes it out, and you realize just how cruel and how different a world you've wound up in. It really sets the tone. And man, did it just keep delivering, dude. After meeting up with the Exarch and being given the choice, I went to see Alice. I couldn't not after our last conversation. And her story is just heartbreaking. I know you have the option to be able to see either of them first, and I do want more places where player choice at least lets you experience the game in a semi-non-linear fashion. But I think Alice's route is slightly more impactful. Don't get me wrong, Alphinaud's and Kaishir's encounter in Gilmore definitely helps with the idea of the complacency and acceptance that people have regarding the whole world's situation, and it helps set the idea of this corruption and people's willingness to abuse it. But Alice and Teslene's tale immediately doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on that pain and horror absolutely sold it for me. And then once you get both of them done, Holminster switch. The trust system opened up so much potential for dungeons. Now stories can be told inside dungeons, even without the need of, like, the boy and the dragon gay. In Teslene, in came brain. Thank you, brain. Even without the need of the boy and the dragon gay. Instead of just clicking interactables, which was a good lore dump, having books on the floor, now the characters can actually talk and expound upon things and share the knowledge that they have, or even just the emotional reactions that they have. Such as when you fight Teslene as the second boss, and Alice's pain during and after the dungeon, needing to go back in. And then the fucking split in the sky at the end of the dungeon, dude. First night sky in 100 bleeding years! And from that, of course, cascaded area after area, cleansed as I reunited with friend after friend. The relief and interesting growth of each character when you find them. Alice is still a red mage, but Alphinaud is still a I don't know. Everybody grew. Everybody grew, and it really helped reinforce the idea that it had been so long since we last saw them. Especially the ones who had been there longer. Oriange in Ilmeg dropping lore bombs about how the first sees umbral and astral elements the other way around. Clearing Titania. Master Matoya, seeing the unnatural buildup of light ether in us, confusing us for a sin eater. The Knights Blessed, how on earth could I forget Reen, then known as Minfilia, and Dadcrid? The gradual buildup of emotional tension again and again between them, swelling as we all face an assault from Volthree, run to Amarang once more to seek Minfilia's aid, meet Magnus, have a heart-to-heart between Thancred and Magnus about Agna and Skuli, to an explosive ahead with Ranjit. And then when Reen comes into her own, and from then on continues to develop as her own person. Like, not that she wasn't her own person beforehand, of course, but at that point, she began thinking of herself as someone else, as someone new, as someone herself. And, with her powers clearing the Amarang Light Warden, it left one, hidden somewhere in Kalusha. Somewhere in Yulmore. Come to find it's hidden at the top of Yulmore with Volthree. Come to find out it is Volthree. The desperation in Reen's voice as she begs Thancred to stop Volthree from consuming more meal. Volthree eating the goddamn fork! Can we talk about that? Oh, I shouldn't take that. Anyway, eating the goddamn fork. Screaming and fleeing. To the artist Alphano and his assistants, getting the help of just about everybody in Norvrent, to the Talos Rising. Oh, lordy, dude. Maybe it's a bit ironic that I hadn't mentioned Feoul up until this point. I had her in mind several times in the story and couldn't call her myself, of course. But then to have her show up so furious, man, what phenomenal writing. And I never thought about it at the time, but an interesting point I read online was that, in a way, it might have been good that we didn't call her often. Fairies are often creatures of give and take and of mischief, so if you asked her for too many or too difficult of favors, who knows what she would have wanted in return. Her coming of her own accord was probably a blessing in disguise. Not that I think she would have done something malicious or asked for anything in return that would seriously impede us. I think the scene of her offering her crown and scepter to us is emblematic of that. And then we come to Squilliam in his underwear meme here. The fight atop Mount Gulg. At the scene right after it, man, god damn, Emmett Selk was such an amazing character. Again, I failed to mention him before, but he was absolutely one of the highlights of the expansion. And strangely enough, despite how much I was loving it, it was at this point that I became slightly burnt out on the game and I needed to take a break from the main story. I loved the story, but right as I was about to talk to the Amuro Keep, to get my tushy off to Kalusha to figure out a way down into the depths, I took a break. I stopped playing the main story, and I started leveling other classes so I could get all the class quests done before continuing. I figured it would become relevant soon. I leveled my gatherers. All in all, I think I didn't finish the story for a month. But then I took the dive down. And Jesus, dude! Just when I thought the expansion couldn't kick me in the dick anymore, I find out, after helping the Sahagin I'd uprooted the lives of, that there's a literal goddamn city down there. Amarat stands there in the ethereal flesh. So much backstory, so much knowledge to be gained, leading to the understanding that the unsundered Asians really and truly just want their home back. But also that in order for that to happen, the fully rejoined source must be sacrificed. Everybody's trepidation just before the final dungeon was a fantastic addition, giving Reen the same words of encouragement that we had once heard, and taking those final steps up to the capital, up to Emmett Selk, and then the final dungeon. It wasn't until recently that I realized that not only does Emmett narrate a story during it, but that the freaking area names on the minimap there, they do too. They aren't names like it shows progress down a street where you go from first street to second street, or from the I don't know, from the captain's quarters onto the deck onto whatever. No, they're parts of or full sentences adding to the story. That's so freaking cool, dude. And then the cutscene where all of our friends fall one by one to Emmett's might, to Reen's last ditch effort failing, to Ardbert. Man, I keep forgetting to mention people. Where do I even begin with Ardbert? I guess here at the ending now, right? But for Ardbert to have gone through so much, to have done so many similar things as us, to the point where we could meme about the feast with him. And then to have our actual friend in this world that truly understands our position give his all to us to save both worlds. And then he just kind of talks through us to Emmett. I mean, I know it's supposed to be us talking, but using his voiceover. And somehow it just keeps getting more hype and better, dude. Fucking Exarch Tia is still kicking, breaks out of whatever hold Emmett had in him, and summons the other people for the trial. And the trial, dude. The desperation and pain from Emmett, calling upon his conjured brethren, the QTE leading to a burst of light, and the special buff. Oh, I noticed that special buff. I hovered over that. Leading to our last stand against him, our friends, injured as they might have been, come through to help us, and we deal the final piercing blow right through Emmett. I will remember you, Emmett. And more on that in later. In another video, actually. What a phenomenal way to bring back the Ascians. Not just bring them back, but make them stand on this pedestal of freaking storytelling. From these nameless villains to, while still villains, people. People with understandable goals, even if we can't agree with said goals. And oh, what good levity right after the swim back, with Dulia Chai screaming, "Welcome back!" Oh, I love that woman. In this house, we appreciate the Chais. What a great ending. And I was like, that's it. They peaked. It's over. Great game. Time to either ride the wave down or fall off the cliff. And yet Yoshi P and Natsuko just stand there like, nah, fam, you're not getting off this crazy-ass ride yet. So with 5.0 done, we still have to get the Scions back into their bodies. They didn't go back over the rift. So we go find a grumpy old Numo Toya to work on vessels. And we get to the next patch where whose freaking body shows up? Hello? They're never really clear on how rot or anything works in this universe, and I'm like, 100 years? Shouldn't he have decayed? You know, returned to the ground? From the Hildebrand side quests, we know that zombies decay. From the Alchemist quest lines, we know that bodies should decay, but there are ways to prevent it or prolong it. So did the Ascians really just, like, keep his body in stasis just in case? A failsafe of, oh, whoops, it didn't work. Well, here, let me spirit you back to your world. Here's your body again. They fully expected the first to be flooded, right? And again, I guess they brought them to the source to stop the flood on their own by tipping the balance or something? Was it to facilitate a faster rejoining before the whole world was lost? I don't actually remember. I'm getting off topic here. That's for another day. But speaking of off topic, this is actually around when I started raiding again. I began doing endgame raiding when Suzaku was released, and stopped during the AlphaScape 12S prog due to monetary issues that led to no internet. I dropped out of my static at the time, but I eventually picked up a new one come the second set of the Eden raids. And interestingly enough, at around the same time, the same patch I'd started raiding the first time. One patch prior, but whatever, same thing. So we find a new Mo! And Elidibert shows up. We get lore bombed to hell and back about Elidibus and Fanat. We meet with Hythlodaeus again, get ourselves a high soul crystal, TM, and then get swarmed by heroes of other worlds. What a freaking concept to bring back the summoning mechanic, albeit an incomplete one. Honestly, it's a real good thing that Elidibus fought us instead of just taking the knowledge of how to summon incomplete incorporeal spirits from other worlds and using that to fuck us over everywhere else. Imagine if he used that in the Source. Imagine if he used that in literally any other star to facilitate rejoinings. So, one dungeon later, one finding Graha and Beklug later, and one tower climb later with a fantastic scene between my Warrior of Light and Graha. And one of the best fights with the original Actually, fun fact, I called that. I kind of called that. I was having a conversation with my coworker, who also played Final Fantasy XIV. I had not finished the patch at the time, although he did, and I always shared my crackpot theories with him. He asked me what I thought was going to happen in the patch, so what do I tell him? I think one of two things are going to happen. Either this is building up to us fighting the original Warrior of Light for the trial, like the OG one, or we're just going to fight some super Elidibert. I didn't notice his expression at the time. I thought he was just reacting to my stupid theory of the original Warrior of Light being the fight. Nope! I called it! It's me! That's right! Anyway, the scene with Elidibus right after the fight, it got to me, man. Once again, for the umpteenth time, the story got me to tear up, and it was so beautifully emotional. The rains may have ceased, but my eyes continued to drip, man. And unfortunately, I did end up falling asleep. And now it's the next day. So here I am finishing up, and my steam is running out. But suffice it to say, I am pumped for Endwalker. 5.4 and 5.5 have been a great way to prep us for the journey to come. Really great, really great way to wrap up Reen and, God, my name, Gaia. Thank you, Brain. Really great way to send off Graha and everybody in 5.3, to have Reen finish up her goal of restoring the empty. It's been a great prep. And holy crap, am I so ready to punch Van Daniel in the face, dude. A lot of this was super rambly, so if you somehow made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for listening. I'm not really sure what else to add at the moment, because I am tired. But I'll probably add any other further thoughts in another video. Something. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and suplex the 5-star rating. Or, don't. I'm not your dad.